Hello, I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. Welcome to Gospel Minded, an outreach of Benedictus Psychological Services. Interested in behavioral health with a Catholic Christian perspective? Check out benedictuspsych.com. On Gospel Minded, we spend a few minutes each week talking about psychology, our emotions, behavioral health, and we reflect on how these important topics are related to the Sunday Gospel reading. I always point out that this isn't a substitute for actually getting yourself to church or participating in counseling, therapy, spiritual direction, if you do those kinds of things. But like we know so well, things of our mind, our psychology, so often go beautifully hand in hand with our spirituality. If this is your first time checking out one of these videos, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Either way, I hope that you will like this video and subscribe to my channel so that you never miss an episode of Gospel Minded. So here we are in ordinary time, moving right along. The gospel reading today is interesting. It comes from John's gospel. It's the story of the wedding feast at Cana. You've probably heard this before, but I want to read just a little bit of it. It says, "There was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the wedding. When the wine ran short, the mother of Jesus said to him, 'They have no wine.' And Jesus said to her, 'Woman, how does your concern affect me? My hour has not yet come.' His mother said to the servers, 'Do whatever he tells you.' Now there were 6 stone water jars there for Jewish ceremonial washings, each one holding 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told them, 'Fill the jars with water.' So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, 'Draw some out now and take it to the head waiter.' So when they took it, the head waiter tasted that the water had become wine." Wow, I'm going to stop right there because that is really something. The first public miracle of the ministry life of Jesus, turning water into wine. I tell you, when I hear that gospel, it makes me think I want to invite Jesus to my parties as well. No, it's a fascinating text, and I think there is so much richness there when we talk about applying this to our spiritual life. But it stood out to me because of psychological reasons. Recently, within the last 3 days, an article was written, and the title of the article kind of grabbed my attention. In the subtext, it said, "Which one of your kids is your favorite?" And I thought, well, now that's interesting. It caught my attention because I've got a bunch of kids, and I thought to myself, well, how can you have a favorite? Who has a favorite kid? How can you say that? But this article was highlighting recent research that was released. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of times, parents who have more than one kid, they will have a favorite. And even if it isn't necessarily like a favorite kid, there might be things about one kid over the other or over the others that they prefer. And so the more I read into this article, the more I started thinking back to my own psychology training, and it reminded me of this scene from the wedding feast at Cana. Why? Because according to that article, some of the key predictors of which child is going to be preferred by the parent are the kids who have this tendency towards agreeableness. Like the kid that is more likely to do what mom and dad ask, is more agreeable and conscientious. Those are the kids that, according to this research, tend to have preferential treatment from mom and dad. So this is an interesting text then today because Jesus doesn't say to his mom, like, "Oh, absolutely, mother. Well, here, tell you what, let me work up a little miracle for you here, and I'm gonna get all this water and turn it into wine." Jesus is kind of like non-committal here. Like, "Woman, how does your concern affect me? My hour has not yet come." And there's a lot that goes into that spiritually speaking. But it kind of reminds me of that passage from Matthew's gospel, Matthew 21, the parable of the two sons. Jesus said to his disciples, he said, "What do you think? A man had two sons, and he went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work in the vineyard today.' And he answered, 'I will not.' But afterward he repented and went. And he went to the second son and said the same. And he answered, 'I'll go, sir,' but did not go. Which of the two did the will of the Father?" The disciples responded, "The first." So in that scene from Matthew's gospel, they're saying that the one that did the will of the Father was that first son who did what Dad asked. Jesus did what his mother asked, and this brings me to an important point about child rearing and behavioral health. The kids that, according to this research, get the preferential treatment are the ones who are more agreeable. Now, here's the thing. I remember when I was first in psychology class, it was a class called Behavior Modification. And the professor said, especially with regard to children, do you want the good attitude or the good behavior? Because a lot of times you don't get both. And I think about that with my own kids. If I say to my kid, go upstairs, you're causing a scene, go upstairs. My kid tends to go upstairs. Oh, but boy, he's not happy about it. And he might stamp and stomp and pout and scream and make a bunch of noise and a bunch of commotion. I remember my psychology professor all those years ago saying, you didn't say go upstairs with a cheerful and good attitude. You're saying go upstairs. That's the behavior that you're wanting to see happen. And the kid did that. So just something to think about when we're talking about working with our own children, whether they're very little, whether they're older or whatever. But when we want them to be agreeable or demonstrate this agreeableness kind of personality trait, just recognize that the agreeableness is one piece of the puzzle, and as long as they're doing the agreeable thing, cool, take that win. Whether or not the cheerful, good attitude comes along, I hope it does. But if it doesn't, so be it. We can work on helping them adjust that aspect. But the agreeableness, the responsiveness that they give, cool. Take that for a win, regardless of what age your kids are. But it is interesting. So this agreeableness thing, it's one of the personality factors. There are 5 big ones, and I've talked about them before. But like the openness to new experiences, conscientiousness is a really big one. Extroversion versus introversion, agreeableness, and then that kind of neurotic sort of tendency. Those are the 5 big personality factors. And it is something that this research found that the kids that are more agreeable and more conscientious tend to have the preferred treatment from their parents. But get this, those 2 personality factors also correlate to kids that grow up to be more successful in adulthood. The more agreeable you are, but the more predictive one for adulthood is that conscientiousness. The more aware I am of my environment and the needs of the people around me, those individuals who score high on that conscientious scale tend to do much better across many domains throughout the course of life. But it is interesting, this other piece of the equation that the article highlighted. So let's say that there's a child who is preferred by mom and dad, and the other children perceive this or know that mom and dad are giving preferential treatment to this other child. That can have some detrimental consequences on the family as a whole. And it talked about some of those things in the article, that if one child perceives that they are not favored, and maybe it is because they are not as agreeable as their brother or sister. The article said that the kid that tends to be most agreeable tends to be a girl, interestingly enough. So let's say you've got boys in the house, and maybe they're not preferred. So be it. It is what it is. Maybe you do have preferences for things about one of your children over the others. But this is the important point of the article, and I think this is the important point of the Christian life, is that all of our kids need to feel our love. And we don't want any of our children to feel as though they are unloved or not appreciated or not cared for by mom or dad or whatever caregiver. They need to experience that love, that tenderness, that compassion that only you as their primary caregiver can provide. And I think about this with our relationship with God. Are there other Christians? Are there other people on this planet that God prefers to me? Probably. When I look at the mirror and see myself, I am aware of imagining that a lot of the things I do, a lot of the things I neglect to do, probably are disappointing to God. And I imagine you can say the same thing about yourself. Nevertheless, I would be lying if I said that I didn't feel the effects of the love that God has for me. And I know that God does. There might be other people that God prefers to me, his own son, Jesus, other Christians, other people in the world. I am sure God prefers to me. Nevertheless, I know so deeply in my heart the love that God has for me. So it may be the case that you have things that you prefer about some of your kids rather than others. You may even be overt, like, yeah, this is the golden child, and maybe your kids are aware of that too, and they might even say that kind of thing. So be it. Just so long as you show that love and tenderness and compassion to all of your littles, whether they're really little or whether they are grown little, your kids need your love. And so Jesus here today, he's agreeable with his mother. He changes that water into wine. We know that the Blessed Mother loved her son. We know that the Father loved the Son. And so our kids, sometimes they're agreeable, sometimes they're less agreeable. Either way, we want to show that love for them that only we as their parents can give. Excellent stuff to think about for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's keep one another in prayer, and I'll see you next time. I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. This is Gospel Minded. Take care.